To a Hebrew, though, steeped in the tradition of ritual sacrifice, there wouldn't be a scandal about Christ's blood. Because to a Hebrew, worshiping in a religion in which sacrifice played a central role, in which sacrifice was the means by which people discovered the grace of God, to someone like that, blood has a different meaning than it does for us in a culture in which we try to avoid the sight of blood. Because in the Hebrew religion, for the ancient Israelites, if one Israelite hurt another Israelite, the violence of that sin was brought before everyone. Brought before God, brought before the people when an animal was sacrificed. And we read in Leviticus 8 that even for people who committed sins unintentionally, they were ordered to go to the temple with a bull and kill it with their own hands. In Numbers 28, we read that the priest slaughtered 2 lambs every day, one at sunup and one at sundown. Then on the Sabbath, and it specifically says, in addition to the daily sacrifice, the priest will kill 2 more lambs on each Sabbath. On the first of the month, in addition to those sacrifices, the priest is ordered to kill 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. So what did all this sacrificing do? I was looking through the Torah, through this section, Leviticus and Numbers, and one phrase that kept on jumping out, that was everywhere. I am the Lord your God. And at first I thought, okay, well, God's telling people to do things they really don't want to do. So he's telling them why they have to do them. Because I have a 3-year-old son, and he likes to ask why. So I figured, God's just saying, I'd tell Matthew to get in the car. And he says, why? And I say, because I'm your father. So I figure that's just what God's doing, I'm the Lord, so that's why you're going to do this. But I think it's a little deeper than that. Because let's just picture ourselves being in the desert with the Israelites and in a place where enemy armies come quickly over the horizon and they burn your village. A place where survival depends on a community being together, on there not being rivalries, on there not being family feuds. When the ancient Israelites were afraid, when they were angry, when they thought that their community was falling apart, when they felt guilty, when they looked and they saw armies approaching, they had something that they could do to remind themselves that God was their Lord. And so doing this sacrifice, made them one body under one Lord. And as long as it was done with genuine devotion and honor, it served this purpose. But quickly, reverence turned into legalism, and rituals which were created to serve the purpose of establishing the equality of all people under God turned into a power play for a priestly caste that specialized in devouring widows and orphans. The priests were weak. They were human. They were appointed by the law. What the people needed was a perfect priest. They needed one who was holy, blameless, and pure. Now, in our day and time, we don't do sacrifice. Our justice system, what we do is we take people who break the law and we put them out of sight and mind. And what we figure is if the math works, okay, if the punishment equals the crime, they cancel out and there's no remainder. But life isn't math. There is a residue. When sin is committed, there is a residue. There is an ambiance that gets created. Let me tell you about that ambiance, okay? Because if you go to some neighborhoods in Durham, okay, in some neighborhoods, if a cop's walking down the street, kind of doing that with this billy club and walking around, the kids are going to hide. They're going to run away because there's a residue of sin. People from other neighborhoods, when they drive down the street, if they see youth of a certain race on the sidewalk, they roll up their windows and they lock their doors. Because there's a residue of sin. There is a residue, an ambiance of fear and hate that we have in our culture. We need a scapegoat. And one example, just look at our national political soap opera. You've got a guy who's an honest man, a hopeful man, a man who criticizes himself more than anybody else, who's trying to get health care for everybody in the country. And people are comparing him to Hitler. If it were a political disagreement, that would make no sense. But it's not. There's a need that's being met. And it's the same need that causes me, being a person who's biased, okay, that causes me to not feel quite as comfortable now as I did before Obama's inauguration, when I had a scapegoat in chief. Okay? Because we live in a world that has all kinds of things to say to us and has no patience to listen. We're lonely, we're broken. And we look on the internet and we see people saying things that make us mad and riled up. I mean, it's just one of the terrible habits that I have is looking at on his websites like Time, where people have commented on articles, and you just see this back and forth, just so much rage. People need a scapegoat. And see what we have actually in our society. We have priests. We don't call them that. They're bloggers and pundits. And, whether radio talk show hosts sometimes, liberal bloggers on the other side. And they offer us a sacrifice. They offer us a scapegoat to crucify. And because we do not acknowledge as high priest the one that we call Lord, we eat the sacrifice they have to give us. We devour the scapegoats that they give us.